The affair wasn't premeditated. It was a mistake, a crack in judgment that widened into a chasm I couldn't close. I'd met someone at work, someone who listened a little more attentively, who noticed when I changed my hair or looked tired. It lasted 6 weeks. No grand romance, no plans to run away, just a series of moments I now wish I'd burned before they ever reached a flame. If you've ever seen silence used as a weapon, like, subscribe, and stay for more stories where forgiveness comes with consequences. I told my husband, Evan, one quiet evening in the kitchen. He was slicing lemons for a cocktail and paused mid-cut when I said the words, "I need to tell you something." When I finished, he didn't shout. He didn't leave. He put down the knife and looked at me like I was a stranger who'd just wandered into his home. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me." That was it. I slept in the guest room that night.
He didn't ask me to.
I just knew the space between us was no longer just emotional. It had become structural. For the next week, he was polite,
Cordial, even.
He kissed our daughter goodnight. He watered the plants. He made coffee for both of us in the mornings, mine without milk, the way I liked it. But something was gone behind his eyes, something soft. And in its place was a stillness that felt like the beginning of a storm. 2 weeks later, he introduced me to her. It was casual at first. He mentioned her name, Maya, in passing. Said she was a therapist who specialized in emotional recovery after betrayal. Said they were talking. I nodded. Encouraged it even. I thought it was healing. Until I saw them at the farmer's market. They weren't holding hands, but they might as well have been. He was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. And when he looked at her, it wasn't just admiration. It was design. She wasn't helping him recover. She was helping him retaliate. The first time I saw her up close, she looked straight through me. Not with malice, but with calculation. Maya had one of those polite, patient smiles, the kind you might expect from someone in customer service or crisis counseling. It was professional, rehearsed, like she'd already run this exact scene in her head and had chosen her facial expression carefully. She didn't say much that day. Just a nod, a quick, "Nice to meet you." But the moment she turned to Evan, her body language shifted, shoulders softened, eye contact deepened, the entire atmosphere recalibrated to make me invisible. That's when I understood. She wasn't just a rebound. She was a message. And I was the intended recipient. It wasn't the affair itself that unnerved me. It was his precision. Evan was calculated in everything, in the way he accidentally left his phone unlocked on the counter with new texts from Maya. In the way he let our daughter mention that Miss Maya had come by to help her with a school project, in how he dropped her name into conversation around mutual friends as if she'd always been part of the picture. But it was our anniversary dinner that made it undeniable. He planned the dinner like he always did. Early reservation, my favorite wine, the same quiet corner booth at the bistro we discovered in our first year together. I assumed it was a peace offering. A bridge. It wasn't. Halfway through the second course, Maya arrived. Not by accident. She walked over to our table, smiled, and said, "Didn't want to interrupt. Just dropping off something for you." She handed him a small envelope. He opened it, pulled out a photo, smiled, then looked at me and said, "You remember that weekend in Asheville?" Turns out I wasn't the only one who enjoyed it. The table went quiet. My fork rested, untouched, next to a plate of perfectly seared duck. Maya walked away like nothing had happened, and Evan leaned back in his chair, arms folded. That's when I realized he didn't want reconciliation. He wanted reflection of my mistake. Amplified, curated,
Punishing.
It wasn't the affair that broke me. It was the performance. I could have lived with the infidelity. I had, after all, expected some kind of retaliation. What I didn't anticipate was the theater he built around it. Evan didn't just cheat. He curated the narrative. He brought Maya to the same spaces I occupied, timed her appearances with precision, and let the story unfold for others to witness, so that when people spoke of what had happened, my mistake was always the prologue, and his response became the main act. He invited her to our daughter's piano recital, sat 2 rows in front of me, held her hand while clapping. When I picked up our daughter afterward, she asked why Miss Maya had hugged her longer than usual. I smiled. But something in me had turned. See, guilt is heavy, but shame, when twisted, is theatrical. And Evan had turned my betrayal into his own form of spotlight. He wanted me to feel what he felt, but worse. He wanted me to be an audience to his recovery, staged to humiliate. What he didn't realize was that I was no longer watching. I was documenting. Screenshots. Photos.
Dates.
I began collecting everything, not out of spite, but necessity. Maya was not just his emotional support. She was on his payroll, hired as a freelance consultant to his design firm shortly after their affair began. I found her invoices. Not large amounts, but steady ones. Enough to draw a line between personal and professional, and blur it just enough to become a legal conflict. I contacted a friend in compliance law. We met for coffee. I slid her the files and asked quietly, "Is this something?" She smiled. "It's more than something," she said. "It's leverage." By the end of that week, I had begun preparing my separation documents, not out of defeat, but design. The same way Evan had used Maya to unspool my dignity, I would use her presence, her paper trail, and his arrogance to walk away with more than just distance. I would walk away with everything he built during the performance. Because when you turn your healing into a weapon, the fallout isn't just emotional, it's measurable. There's a moment in any betrayal where grief turns into something colder, clearer. It stops being about emotions and starts being about outcomes. I wasn't crying anymore. I was calculating. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Evan thought he'd turn the tables. That by parading Maya around, he'd won back control. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't see through the fog of his own ego, was that his performance had opened doors I never would have touched otherwise. Our shared assets were plentiful. 2 properties, a healthy investment portfolio, and a jointly owned interest in his design firm, a business I had helped brand, market, and grow in its early stages. That equity was legally mine. And more importantly, it was now tangled with his affair. Because when I filed for separation, I didn't cite infidelity. I cited misuse of joint business funds and reputational damage to a co-owned entity. My lawyer presented every invoice Maya had submitted. She had been paid with our shared funds. She had dined on our expense account. And worse, she had signed off on client deliverables that had passed through my name as co-creative consultant. The hearing was private. The damage wasn't. Evan sat across from me at the table, for once not smiling. Maya wasn't there. She'd backed out of the partnership the week prior, citing undue public exposure and reputational concerns. Her departure nullified his legal defense. Her invoices became inadmissible. He tried to blame me, said I had weaponized her involvement. The judge didn't blink. She granted me majority equity in the firm, primary residence, and full custody with visitation rights, pending therapeutic review. I didn't smile. I just signed the papers and left the room. Because there's no satisfaction in revenge. Not when it's this clinical. There's only the return of balance. Of watching a man who orchestrated his pain into a weapon finally realize the script had flipped. And he wasn't the lead anymore. It came 3 weeks after the settlement. A simple text, no emojis, no typos, rare for Evan. Just 6 words. I guess we both went too far.
I stared at it for a long time.
Not because it moved me, but because of what it revealed. Even now, in the aftermath, he saw us as equal participants in the collapse. as if his calculated humiliation campaign and my 6-week affair were mirror images, as if retaliation wasn't a choice, but a reflex. I didn't respond, because I was no longer part of that narrative. I was building a new one. Maya had vanished from his orbit. Her consultancy website went offline. Her social accounts were scrubbed. Mutual acquaintances said Evan was taking time off to recalibrate, which is corporate speak for licking wounds without making it look like defeat. I stayed quiet, didn't post about the house, or the custody, or the promotion that came 2 months later at the agency I'd returned to full-time. I let people guess. Let them piece together what they'd heard about the scandal, the court documents, the quiet way Maya disappeared after the invoices surfaced. Some reached out in whispers, in solidarity. Others didn't speak, but stared longer at the school drop-off line. And Evan? He tried once more, a long email this time.
No anger.
Just reflection. He wrote about how he felt powerless when I cheated, how Maya gave him structure. How watching me take control in the end made him feel like he never had it. I didn't reply. I archived the message. Not because it wasn't worthy of acknowledgement, but because some endings don't deserve punctuation. They just deserve distance. If you've ever watched someone try to turn pain into performance, like, subscribe, and stay for more stories where quiet strategy replaces loud revenge.